Hi, Founder fans. Jason here, and today's founder is Samuel Hodgdon, the first quartermaster general under the United States Constitution. But we're going to back up a little bit first, talk about his early career in the American Revolutionary War. You see, he was just 22 years old when Hodgdon joined the Continental Army, and he was quickly appointed as a captain of artillery. In this position, he was working under Henry Knox, and Knox recognized his talents, and eventually Hodgdon is pretty quickly promoted to field commissary of military stores, which meant he was in charge of all the military stuff in the field, both going to the field and coming from the field. He succeeds in this position wildly, and by 1781, he is promoted to commissary general of military stores. And in this position, he works just below quartermaster Timothy Pickering. Now, they become fast friends and end up starting a business together after the war and have a lifelong friendship. It's very sweet. But as quartermaster general, Timothy Pickering is in charge of overseeing the whole operation, the whole business of feeding and clothing and arming an army. And as commissary general of military stores, Hodgdon is in charge of getting the stuff that Timothy Pickering has to and from the soldiers. That's the whole military stores point. He oversees the stores. What are we holding on to? What's going in? What's coming out? He does really well at this. Granted, the war ends, and as I said, he ends up going into business investing in land with Timothy Pickering. But once the United States Constitution is ratified, which he supports, George Washington starts the Washington administration. Now, Washington does assemble a cabinet pretty quickly, but he doesn't really choose a quartermaster general because there is no army when the Constitution is ratified. There is technically a United States Army from the Articles of Confederation, but it's like 100 people. It's mostly militias being brought in and out. It takes a bit to organize, but when it is organized, Hodgdon is appointed as quartermaster general, and this is mostly due to the Northwest Indian War. The Northwest Indian War at the time was taking place in what we now know as Illinois and Michigan and Indiana, that region of the modern United States. And Arthur St. Clair had gone out there to take over and try and clean up the mess, because this war had been going on since before the Constitution, with the Native Americans that had united in a confederacy in that part of the world. Hodgdon is chosen as quartermaster general, takes over his old buddy Pickering's job. Side note, Timothy Pickering was about to be Secretary of State, so there you go. Hodgdon goes, he is responsible for feeding and clothing and equipping this army in the Northwest. Unfortunately, Hodgdon has two flaws. First of all, he really wants to save money, which I know is a good idea, but when you're winning a war, sometimes you should spare no expense. Additionally, Hodgdon had never been to the Northwest, again, the area of the Ohio Valley, Indiana, Ohio, so he didn't really understand what it took to not only feed and clothe an army out there, but to move an army through these locations. So they were given old rusty axes and machetes that weren't made for cutting your way through wilderness. Unfortunately, this does slow down the army, and as I said, their morale was low, and it leads to St. Clair's defeat. And Arthur St. Clair's defeat is still known as arguably the worst defeat for any army in American history. So, not great. Arthur St. Clair ends up blaming Hodgdon for sending crappy supplies. Hodgdon, in turn, with the Washington administration, blames St. Clair for losing the war. Although I shouldn't say losing the war. Of course, Mad Anthony Wayne shows up and wins that war. But the defeat was epic. So, St. Clair ends up, like I said, he loses the war. He blames Hodgdon. Blame goes back and forth. St. Clair actually calls for Hodgdon to be investigated. Now, this never comes to fruition. Actually, Hodgdon ends up resigning his position, seemingly to kind of save the Washington administration embarrassment and just to get over the whole thing. Like I said, St. Clair gets replaced by Anthony Wayne. The war is won, and just less than a year later, due to the urging of President Washington himself, Hodgdon does return to the now United States Army. And he takes up his old position of Commissary General of Military Stores, only it's under a new name, Superintendent of Military Stores. Again, there's a young army. It's not a big army. After the Northwest Indian War is won, the size of the army shrinks. And again, this is before the quasi-war under President John Adams. So during this interval, the downtime, Hodgdon essentially is running a gigantic portion of the young United States Army, making sure that all of the wares and goods of the Army, the powder and weapons, the uniforms, you name it, he is in charge of storing it and keeping it good. Seemingly, he does a little bit better because he is kept on by President Adams during the quasi-war with France. Then he is let go by Thomas Jefferson when Jefferson takes over because, while John Adams was trying to continue holding on to much of the administration of George Washington to keep a unified front as he could, Thomas Jefferson did not care. And Clean House brought in all his own guys, and this includes Samuel Hodgdon, who ends up going on to continue working with Timothy Pickering, continue investing in land. He ends up running an early insurance company, and he becomes pretty fabulously wealthy. So this guy does pretty good for himself. That's a brief overview of the life of Samuel Hodgdon, the first Quartermaster General for the United States of America under the Constitution. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, definitely hit like, subscribe for American Revolution all week long, trivia on Fridays, lots of fun stuff. I really enjoyed making this for you. I hope you enjoyed watching it, and I'll be back with another founder for you tomorrow.